General Hospital spoilers for Thursday, July 3rd tease that Trina had always prided herself on her instincts, on her ability to read people, to sense danger before it could strike. That was why. When she saw Kai becoming increasingly entangled in Drew's orbit, a deep sense of dread began to settle into her chest like a weight she couldn't shake. At first, it was subtle, just a few casual meetings, shared glances, murmured conversations about opportunity and influence. But over time, Trina noticed a shift in Kai's demeanor. The sparkle of youthful idealism that once defined him had dulled into something darker, more calculating. Drew had a way of speaking that was persuasive, magnetic even. He didn't need to shout or command, he offered visions, promises, ideas that seemed too alluring to ignore. And Kai, with his hunger to define himself outside of the shadows of others, was the perfect target. Trina knew the look in Kai's eyes. She had seen it before, on people who were too close to danger and convinced they could control it. It was a mix of curiosity, ambition, and something far more dangerous, temptation. She tried to reach him, pulling him aside during one of their rare quiet moments together. She warned him that Drew was not someone to be trusted. That everything he touched became twisted by his need to control outcomes, to manipulate those around him. But as she spoke, she saw Kai's expression shift, not to concern or fear, but to quiet resistance. He didn't argue. He didn't reassure her. He simply looked through her, as if trying to calculate whether her words aligned with the future he thought he wanted. That's when Trina realized the most terrifying part of it all. Kai wasn't just being manipulated, he was beginning to believe in Drew. He was starting to internalize Drew's rhetoric about strength, survival, and strategic alignment. It wasn't just about following a man with power, it was about reshaping his own identity around the things Drew represented. That realization sent a chill down Trina's spine. She could feel it, something irreversible was beginning to take root inside Kai, and if she didn't act soon, the boy she knew might be consumed by a version of himself she wouldn't recognize. The emotional rift widened with every passing day. Kai began to distance himself from people who grounded him. He missed important conversations. He declined invitations. He spent more and more time in secret meetings, crafting strategies he wouldn't share. Trina watched in helpless silence as the boy who once trusted her implicitly began to treat her like an obstacle. And still, she couldn't give up. There was still time. There had to be. She confronted him again, more forcefully, this time showing him evidence of Drew's past manipulations, of the people who had suffered under his leadership. She laid out every twisted decision, every quiet betrayal. But Kai remained unmoved. He listened, nodded, even smiled, but the smile wasn't warm. It was cold, polite, dismissive. It was the smile of someone who had already chosen their path. And Trina knew, with aching certainty, that she wasn't speaking to Kai anymore, not the version she had known. She was speaking to someone transformed, someone reborn in the image of a man who viewed relationships as leverage and morality as a liability. This new obsession, this dark fascination Kai now carried, wasn't just with Drew, it was with the idea of control, of power, of finally being someone who didn't need to ask for a seat at the table. Trina feared that this obsession would devour him from the inside, leaving behind only ambition and regret. But worse than that, she feared that Kai's descent would cause collateral damage far beyond himself. Because if Drew saw potential in Kai, he would weaponize it. And if Kai allowed himself to be used, he might someday wake up to find he had become the very danger Trina tried to save him from. And in the quiet that followed their last conversation, Trina couldn't stop shaking. Not because she was angry or afraid, but because she could already see the future spiraling out of control. A future where Drew pulled the strings, Kai became the instrument. And everything good between them was reduced to smoke and ash. Maxie had always been the type of person who followed her instincts, especially when it came to protecting those she loved. But this time, as she delved deeper into the unsettling discovery, she felt a chill crawl up her spine. Sasha, the woman she'd considered a friend, was slipping through her fingers, again. Maxie had watched Sasha endure so much pain in the past, and each time she thought Sasha had finally found peace, something came along to knock her down again. This time, however, it was different. This wasn't just about a broken heart or a simple misunderstanding. It was about someone deliberately trying to break Sasha down, manipulate her into something unrecognizable. And it was happening right before Maxie's eyes. It all began innocently enough when Maxie noticed Sasha's erratic behavior. One minute she was calm and the next, she was spiraling. At first, Maxie assumed it was just the pressures of being a new mom, the overwhelming nature of parenthood, and the stresses of dealing with her public image. But as time went on, Maxie began to notice something more sinister. Sasha was withdrawing, not just from her friends, but from her own family, particularly Wiley and Amelia. She was growing distant from everyone, shutting herself off in a way that seemed unnatural. It wasn't until Maxie found herself alone with Sasha one evening, when they were both reflecting on motherhood and the chaos of their lives, that the true gravity of the situation became clear. Sasha had begun to confide in Maxie about feeling like she was losing control, like she was losing herself. The words hit Maxie hard. Those words, they weren't just about motherhood. They weren't just about the pressures Sasha was facing. No, these words were a cry for help. Sasha was sinking into something far deeper, something darker. Maxie's suspicions grew when Sasha began mentioning strange occurrences, subtle signs of her reality being warped. Things that didn't make sense. Small objects misplaced. Conversations that felt off. It wasn't paranoia, Sasha was being manipulated, controlled. Someone, somewhere, was toying with her mind, pulling strings from the shadows, and the more Maxie listened, the more she realized it wasn't just happening by accident. There was a deliberate force behind it. Sasha's words became harder to understand, her thoughts fragmented. It was as if someone was orchestrating the chaos inside her head. That's when Maxie's investigation began. At first, it was casual, a few offhand comments, some subtle questions, trying to piece together what had been happening. But it didn't take long for Maxie to realize that this was no coincidence. There was someone out there, someone close to Sasha, who was orchestrating every bit of her emotional collapse. That's when the clues started to point to one person, Daisy. It was subtle at first. Just a hunch, but as Maxie dug deeper, the pieces started to fall into place. Daisy wasn't just someone in Sasha's life, Daisy was the one behind the manipulation. Maxie's heart sank as she pieced together the evidence. She found herself going through old conversations, texts, and emails that Sasha had exchanged with Daisy. They all seemed innocent at first. But when Maxie looked closer, she could see the subtle ways Daisy had planted seeds of doubt and fear in Sasha's mind. A kind word here, a vague statement there. But all of it pointed to one thing: Daisy had been methodically wearing Sasha down, manipulating her into thinking she wasn't in control of her own life. Maxie couldn't stand idly by and watch Sasha deteriorate. She had to do something. But as she began to confront Sasha about what she'd uncovered, she realized how deep Daisy's influence had gone. Sasha didn't want to believe it. She refused to see Daisy for what she truly was. To Sasha, Daisy had always been someone who could be trusted, someone who understood her. But now Maxie knew that trust had been nothing more than a carefully crafted illusion. Daisy wasn't a friend, she was a manipulator. She was controlling Sasha's every move, and Sasha had no idea. Maxie couldn't let that happen. She wasn't going to let Daisy continue to destroy the woman she considered a sister. But as Maxie confronted Sasha, she found herself caught in the middle of a situation far more dangerous than she could have imagined. Daisy had already started to isolate Sasha from everyone who loved her. And now Maxie was standing at the edge of something much darker. She could see it in Sasha's eyes, the fear, the confusion, the uncertainty. It was too late to just sit back and let things play out. Maxie had to take action. But the more she dug into Daisy's past, the more she realized that Daisy was far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. She wasn't just a friend who had gotten too close. Daisy was calculating, manipulative, and willing to do anything to achieve her own goals. Maxie had to find a way to expose Daisy. To get Sasha to see her for what she really was before it was too late. Maxie knew that time was running out. Sasha was on the brink of losing everything, her family, her friends, her sanity. Maxie wasn't just fighting for Sasha's well-being anymore, she was fighting to save her life. But as Maxie went down this dark path of uncovering Daisy's manipulation, she realized that she might be too late. Daisy had already planted herself so deep in Sasha's mind that it might be impossible to undo the damage. Maxie was determined, though. She wouldn't stop until she had all the facts, all the proof she needed to take Daisy down and free Sasha from the grip she had on her. But as the walls closed in, Maxie started to realize that this wasn't just a battle for Sasha's life. This was a battle for all of their lives. Daisy wasn't just trying to control Sasha, she was trying to control everything and everyone around her. And if Maxie couldn't stop her, then Sasha's future, and perhaps her own, would be forever tainted by Daisy's dark influence. Maxie knew this wasn't just about saving Sasha anymore. This was about stopping Daisy, before it was too late. Dante's determination to find Jason was born from a deep sense of urgency. The stakes had never been higher. Christina was in grave danger. And the situation was spiraling out of control at a terrifying pace. The danger she faced wasn't just a simple threat, it was a looming disaster that could change everything. Dante was painfully aware that Sunny's enemies weren't just targeting him anymore, they were coming after his family, and Christina was now right at the center of it. Jason, ever the protector, was the key to ensuring the safety of Sunny's loved ones, but finding him in time was going to be a race against the clock. Dante knew that Jason's ability to protect, his tactical expertise, and his understanding of Sunny's enemies were vital right now. But as much as Jason's skills were needed, the clock was ticking. Christina's life was on the line. And Dante's only hope was to unite with Jason before it was too late. But this wasn't just about Christina. It was bigger than that. Joe's life was also at risk. And Dante couldn't ignore the danger his brother-in-law was in. Joe's involvement with the family's ongoing conflicts was well known, and the enemies they were facing were relentless. Dante's mind raced, knowing that if things escalated further, Gio might not make it out unscathed. The situation was getting worse by the hour. And Dante knew that every second he wasted was a second closer to the destruction of the people he loved. With Jason's expertise and Dante's intimate knowledge of their enemies, they needed to act swiftly and decisively. It wasn't just about saving Christina and Gio anymore. It was about protecting everyone who mattered to Sunny and ensuring that no more lives were lost in the chaos. As the two men joined forces to navigate the perilous situation, Dante felt the pressure mounting. His every move felt calculated, knowing that the lives of his loved ones depended on his actions. The tension was palpable, the stakes higher than ever before. In a town like Port Charles, nothing was ever straightforward, and with enemies closing in, the danger was ever present. Dante's heart pounded as he realized how close they were to the edge. If Jason and he didn't act fast, it could all come crashing down. What had started as a search for answers was now a race against time to protect his family. And the weight of that responsibility was heavier than anything he had ever felt before. The next move had to be perfect, there was no room for error. Jason and Dante knew that the choices they made in the coming hours would define the future of Sunny's family. This wasn't just about survival, it was about ensuring that no more sacrifices were made. That no one else had to pay the price for their enemies' thirst for revenge. With everything on the line, Jason and Dante were ready to take the risks, to face the threats head-on. And to make sure that no one else would fall victim to the vicious game that their enemies were playing. It was time to act, before it was too late. Lulu's warning to Laura wasn't just a casual piece of advice, it was a desperate plea rooted in years of painful experience. She had watched time and time again as her family was dragged into Sunny's chaotic world, a world filled with violence, manipulation, and unending conflict. Sunny's actions. no matter how well-intentioned, always seemed to send shockwaves through the people around him. And now, as the latest storm was brewing, Lulu was determined to stop her mother from being pulled into it. Sunny had always been a force of nature in Port Charles. He had built an empire from the ground up, and along the way, he had made enemies in every corner of the city. While Sunny's motivations were often driven by a sense of loyalty and a desire to protect his family, the path he chose to walk was fraught with danger. Lulu had seen it all before, and she knew that no one, not even someone as strong and resilient as her mother, was immune to the consequences of being too close to Sunny's world. It wasn't just about the constant threats from his enemies, or the business dealings that took a darker turn than expected. It was the emotional toll that Sunny's life exacted from everyone around him. Lulu had grown up in a world where her father, Luke, was constantly in danger. And now, watching her mother, Laura, step into a similar role, only this time with Sunny, made her feel an all too familiar sense of dread. No matter how much Laura wanted to believe that she could help Sunny, Lulu knew that there was a part of him, the part that had made him who he was, that could never be truly changed. In that moment, Lulu realized just how much her mother had always been drawn to Sunny's world, much like everyone else who had ever crossed paths with him. Laura's compassion, her desire to help, her need to believe in the good in people, all of that was what made her the woman she was. But it was also what made her vulnerable to Sunny's influence. And in a way, Lulu understood. Sunny had a way of making people believe that they could make everything right, even when everything was falling apart. But this time, it was different. This time, the stakes were higher. The tension between Sunny and his enemies had escalated to a point where even the slightest misstep could have catastrophic consequences. The business wasn't just about power anymore. It was about survival. And Laura, despite her best intentions, was walking right into the eye of the storm. Lulu could feel the weight of it all bearing down on her. The fear that if her mother didn't listen, if she didn't step away from Sunny's world, she would end up hurt, or worse. Lulu couldn't shake the feeling of déjà vu. How many times had she warned her loved ones to stay away from Sunny's world? How many times had she tried to protect them from the dangers that seemed to follow him wherever he went? And yet, every time, they were pulled back in. It wasn't just Sunny's enemies that were the threat, it was the way he made people feel like they mattered, like they could make a difference, and in the end, they were always left with the mess he created. Lulu's frustration grew with each passing second as she watched Laura's face, so filled with love and hope, as she considered Sunny's offer to help. In some ways, Lulu felt like she was watching a tragedy unfold before her eyes. Her mother was walking into a situation that she couldn't control. And no amount of good intentions could protect her from what was coming. Lulu had seen this pattern play out before, and the outcome was never pretty. The emotional toll of being involved in Sunny's world was one thing, but the physical danger, the constant fear of loss, was another. Lulu's heart ached for her mother, knowing that no matter what she said, Laura might not be able to break free. The problem was, Laura had always believed that she could save people, that she could change things. And she often found herself drawn to those in need of saving. But with Sunny, it was different. Sunny didn't need saving. His world was built on power, influence, and the ability to manipulate. And while his motives were often driven by love, by loyalty, by a desire to protect his family, that world was one that had no room for weakness. No room for error. And no room for someone like Laura, who wanted to believe that everything could be fixed with love and kindness. Lulu knew her mother's heart, and she knew how much she wanted to help. But she also knew the reality of what would happen if Laura didn't pull away. It wasn't just the danger Sunny brought into her life, it was the way he made everyone around him a part of his mess. The more involved they became, the harder it was to walk away. And in the end, Sunny's world would consume them all, whether they liked it or not. But Lulu also knew that the hardest part of this situation wasn't getting Laura to see the danger. It was watching her make the decision to stay, to continue believing that she could fix things when, in reality, she couldn't. Sunny's world wasn't a place that could be fixed. It was a place that broke people, time and time again. And for Lulu, it was the hardest thing in the world to watch the woman she loved most walk right into that storm. In the end, Lulu couldn't stop her mother from making her own choices. But she could try to protect her in whatever way she could. The question was, would it be enough? Could she save Laura from the heartbreak and pain that Sunny's world inevitably brought with it? Only time would tell. But for now, all Lulu could do was hope that, for once, her mother would listen, and walk away before it was too late. Michael was clearly torn. His emotions and mind in a state of chaos as he found himself caught between the growing tension around him and his own responsibilities. The changes that had started to unfold in his life were becoming too overwhelming to ignore. The ongoing conflict between Willow and Sasha had escalated into a full-blown battle. Each woman fighting not only for what they believed in but for something far more personal, the future of their families and the love they shared with Michael. As much as he wanted to remain neutral, to keep his focus on doing what was best for everyone, it was becoming increasingly difficult. The emotional toll on Michael was palpable. He found himself caught in the middle of two powerful forces, his love for Willow and the undeniable bond he shared with Sasha. Both women had valid reasons for their actions. But their fierce determination to win him over was creating a divide that seemed insurmountable. What had once been a promising relationship with Willow now felt strained. And the weight of Sasha's lingering presence only deepened the complexities. Michael couldn't shake the feeling that every decision he made would inevitably hurt someone he cared about. The latest developments had only heightened the pressure. Sasha, already vulnerable due to her traumatic experiences and struggles, was now fully immersed in a battle with Willow. A fight that neither of them seemed willing to back down from. Their rivalry was no longer just about love and possession, it had grown into something far more intense. It was about control. About proving who was worthy of Michael's trust, and most importantly, about who could offer the stability and future that the children they loved so much needed. For Michael, it was as if the ground beneath his feet was slipping away. His heart, once so certain in its affections, was now clouded by confusion. He felt the pull of each woman's love. But he also recognized that their rivalry was poisoning everything around them. He was starting to question his own decisions, unsure of which path to take. The last thing he wanted was to lose both women. He couldn't bear to see them continue to fight, unable to reconcile the irreparable damage that had already been done. In the midst of all this turmoil, there was a looming question Michael had to face. Could he continue to hold on to the ideal of what he once had with Willow, or was there a new path waiting for him with Sasha? The growing tension between the two women had begun to feel like a ticking time bomb, with no clear solution in sight. Michael was realizing, more and more, that he was losing control of the situation, and it scared him. He had always prided himself on being a problem solver, but this was beyond him. The emotional weight of the situation was starting to break through his usual calm demeanor. He was unsure of how to approach either woman without causing irreparable damage. He had already made choices that hurt both of them, and the consequences of his actions were only becoming clearer. The war between Willow and Sasha was no longer just an external conflict. It had seeped into every aspect of his life, consuming his thoughts, his actions, and his relationships. As Michael watched everything around him fall apart, the question that loomed over him was whether he could find a way to bring peace to the turmoil. Could he ever repair the damage, or was this the inevitable end to everything he once held dear? It seemed like no matter what choice he made, someone would suffer. The fear of losing both Willow and Sasha, two people he loved deeply, haunted him. And he began to question whether he was even capable of making the right choice anymore.